Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. They're making me laugh off camera. Sorry about that. Thank you for watching. I am Vivian King, your co-host. I am board certified in criminal law by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization. And as you know, I bring you this show each week to educate you about the criminal justice system. We do it in many, many different ways. We tell it from our point of view, from an urban point of view. You'll have an opportunity to call in and ask questions, like always, at halftime at about 7 p.m. Don't forget to call the number 713-807-1794. Tonight, I'm so excited because we're bringing you a different type of show. We're going to talk tonight about where civil law collides with criminal law. And it's going to be very interesting, might get a little spicy, but we have in the studio Rhonda Wills of the Wills Law Firm. She is a civil lawyer extraordinaire, one of my very good friends, and she specializes in personal injury litigation and employment litigation. So tonight she'll talk to us about two very involved civil cases that stem from and collide with the criminal justice system. I have one of my regular girlfriends here, and that is Miss Juanita Jackson. She is a criminal law expert, and she is a proud member of the Harris County Public Defender's Office. And you know Mr. Danny. I have Danny Sneed in the audience tonight. Not in the audience, but at my table. And we're so excited to congratulate Danny because as of now, he is off parole as of August 5th, 2015, where he has been involved with the criminal justice system for 26 years. But as you know, thank you, Jesus, as you know, Danny did a total of 15 years, and he works for the VA hospital. He's a proud veteran that works for the VA hospital. So without any further ado, we will speak to Miss Rhonda Wills. Thank you, my very sweet, special girlfriend, for coming tonight to educate us about civil law.
Well, Vivian, thank you so much for having me on your television program. I think this is a great forum and a great way for you to educate the public, in particular about criminal law issues. But I'm an attorney who specializes in civil litigation. And for those of you at home that don't know what civil litigation essentially is when you've either been injured or you've had an employment issue, but essentially you're suing primarily for money damages, as opposed to criminal law, which deals with when you've been charged with a crime. However, oftentimes in civil cases where we're suing for money damages, we do have criminal issues that arise, and there are two cases in particular that I'd like to discuss with your audience today, Vivian, in talking about how suing for money damages can also involve some criminal aspects.
Yes, ma'am. We want to hear it. Thank you.
So one of the cases, which I know, Vivian, you and Juanita both are familiar with, I represent a woman named Rhonda and her family, and Rhonda lived in an apartment complex here in Houston on the southwest side of town. And when she moved into this complex with her husband and their two young children, she was assured by the apartment complex that they would have security. They would have a security guard that would patrol the complex. And Rhonda and her family actually moved to Houston from New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina. So they literally arrived in Houston with nothing but the clothes on their backs. And they've had to work very hard to rebuild their lives. So money was very tight for this family. Rhonda was a stay-at-home mom that sometimes worked part-time, and her husband worked sometimes 2 and 3 jobs. One night, Rhonda's husband was returning home, and as he went to return home and went to walk into their apartment, 3 or 4 guys jumped him with guns. And they pushed him inside of his apartment where his wife and 2 young children were asleep. The assailants came into the apartment. They were screaming, yelling, asking him for his money. He kept saying, I'll give you what I have. I mean, this is a man that doesn't have a lot of money. He kept his money under his mattress. He went into his bedroom, pulled all the cash he had under his mattress out. He gave it to them. He's like, take the TV, whatever you want. And then these guys started pistol whipping him. And they beat him until he had blood running down his face. And at parts he felt like he was going to pass out because he was beaten so severely by these assailants. They then dragged his daughter that they had pulled out of her bed, his 10-year-old daughter, and they tied both of them up in the master bedroom right in front of the closet. And meanwhile, while those two guys were tying them up, two other guys had grabbed Raina, drug her out of her bed, drug her into the bathroom where there was one wall separating the apartment master bedroom from the bathroom, and they took her into the bathroom and proceeded to gang rape her. And Raina's husband and her 10-year-old daughter, who were just a paper-thin wall away, heard Raina screaming and crying as she was being gang raped by these men that had broken into their home. And she was literally screaming at the top of her lungs. But there was nothing he could do. He was tied up. His daughter was tied up. He had blood running down his face. And the whole time that Raina is being gang raped, she's just thinking, please don't let these men do anything to my child. I just don't want them to hurt my child. And the whole time they're gang raping her, they have two guns pointed to her head. Unfortunately, because the apartment complex did not follow through on what they promised, which was to provide security, no one discovered anything going on. This went on for hours. This gang rape and torture of this family went on for hours. She screamed at the top of her lungs. No one heard her. And no one heard her because the security guard that they had promised that would be on patrol 24/7, they'd gotten rid of in order to save money. So there was no security at the apartment complex. And as a result of that, this family, they were destroyed. I mean, Raina will never be the same. Her 10-year-old daughter will never be the same. Her husband will never be the same. Their lives have basically been wrecked by what happened with these assailants, and the apartment complex could have had security, which likely would have prevented what happened. I mean, people pick easy targets. So when you see an apartment complex where the security gate doesn't work, there are gaps in the security gate where it's easy for you to access the premises, and there's no security guard on the premises, that's pretty much an easy target for a lot of robbers and rapists and criminals. So we have filed a lawsuit against the apartment complex as well as the management company for negligence in their failure to adequately provide a secured premises for their tenants, Raina and her family.
Wow, that's an interesting and heartfelt story, and I'm glad a fantastic civil lawyer like you has taken a case like this, because you take these cases under a contingency fee. So you have to supply the manpower and the investigatory tools to make sure that someone is paid. Is that correct?
That's correct. So for your viewers, to educate them on what a contingency fee is in a civil case, a contingency fee basically means if someone wants to come in and hire me, they don't bring any money with them. They simply hire me to handle their case. I advance all expenses necessary for their case, to take depositions, to hire experts, to hire private investigators, whatever it takes to get their case fully investigated and fully litigated, and to take it to trial if necessary, or to negotiate a settlement where we can. And so I advance all of the money necessary in the case, and the only way that I ever get paid anything or I ever get reimbursed my expenses is if I win the case. And when I do win the case, I get a percentage, which is also known as a contingency fee.
Let me ask you another question. Do you, in this particular case of Raina, is the criminal aspect of the case, did these kids ever get found and charged?
Well,
I'm calling them kids because they're usually young people.
They were four men. I'm not going to call them kids. I think that it's estimated that the assailants were likely in their 20s and 30s. So these were grown men. And no, they have never been caught.
Wow.
They are still at large, and that's one of the things that haunts Raina, knowing that, these monsters are still out there. These men that came into her home and sexually violated her and tortured her family, they're still out there. And they're still out there because, again, the apartment complex did absolutely nothing to protect this family.
Wow. I'm going to have to flip this now to Juanita Jackson, who is a criminal law expert in my eyes and in her office's eyes. And so, Juanita, talk to us about what it takes for the prosecution to prosecute these four men.
Well, ultimately, since these 4 men have never been found, that's kind of just speculation. But ultimately, in these kinds of cases, if someone's found, they could have been charged with many things. It sounds like it's even from an aggravated assault to aggravated sexual assault. We don't use the criminal term rape is not a criminal term. The correct term is aggravated sexual assault or sexual assault. Rape is I think what people know, common term, and it might even be a civil term, but it's just definitely not a criminal term. And ultimately, they'd have to prove that it was without consent, it was done to sexually gratify. In these kind of horrific kind of situations, it would be pretty much easy if they were caught.
Yeah,
and if there was DNA.
There was a rape kit that was taken.
And so these people didn't even use a condom? I mean, there is DNA in
There
the
is
woman?
DNA, that is correct.
Wow.
There is DNA. A rape kit was done. They left Raina tied up as well when they finally left after hours of torturing them. Eventually, she was able to get untied, and she called 911, and the police came, and an ambulance came, and they did do a rape kit.
Do you know if they've even tested it? Because at this point, Harris County is one of the counties that has the largest number of rape kits that have not even been processed. So a lot of times, unfortunately, the rape kits sit there untested when they don't even have a suspect. So usually if they have a suspect, then they facilitate the process of getting it tested. So one of the things that you could do as an attorney is demand or call the DA's office and demand that they be processed.
I think they can even call the forensic offices to get it tested, because as a citizen, you can ask the Harris County Forensic Institute to test it. And let me tell you why that's important. If we get it tested soon enough, then we have that CODIS, we have that data bank of DNA. So everybody who gets in trouble has given DNA.
Everyone
Right, Dan?
that has ever been, that's part of many people's probation, part of being involved in TDC. If they are in TDC, they are in the CODIS data bank. So the reality is that if there's some DNA, it probably could be a case, but it's not something that the DA's office is going to do.
I was going to say, what we've been told is there is a backlog,
Right.
that it's expensive,
Right.
and that she's on the list, and that they will get to her case. But there are apparently thousands of cases ahead of her case.
There are. Harris County is
And
one of
so
the biggest
they're not
cases
going to
with those.
leapfrog over those other cases to process
Right. They
Raina's
won't.
rape kit.
But the
Apparently-
good news.
You can, it's private. You can ask and have it privately tested.
have it privately
That's not
tested.
anything maybe that a civil attorney would want to do.
But even if you had it privately tested, unless you have access to the database, you wouldn't be able to.
No. If you had it privately tested, then you can file the charges yourself. Then the DA's office will take the charges if there's a hit. There can be a hit. But the deal is the statute of limitations for rape is very long. And so,
We were also told that.
yeah, so they will be caught eventually. Unfortunately, it'll be kind of cold by then, but her memories won't be gone. And the good news is, if I'm right, if I remember this from civil procedure in law school, and that is, it doesn't matter about the money damages as long as they had insurance. Is that correct?
Yes,
Whether they're caught
the
or not
apartment
doesn't matter.
complex and the management company do have insurance. Both have insurance.
At least they didn't let the insurance lapse like they let the security guard and the gate lapse.
Well, the reason that they maintain insurance is because the insurance protects them. The insurance is meant to protect the apartment complex and the management company.
And the bottom line, if Raina and her family were in their own individual home, they wouldn't be able to really probably sue anybody. Would
But
that
if
be
they were in
correct?
their own individual home, they would have had a security gate that works.
Not
They would have,
necessarily.
but they would have been able to provide security for their own premises. When you live in an apartment complex, a multi-family unit where there are so many other people dwelling there with you, one of the things, and I can remember when I was in college and I lived in an apartment, one of the things that you always look for is what kind of security does
Right.
this complex provide, because you can't afford to have your individual home. I remember in college when it was, ramen noodles for dinner every day. And so you're struggling to make it. This is a young family that's struggling to make it, who literally, after Hurricane Katrina, started their lives all over. They're not educated people, but they're hardworking people.
Was it one child or two?
There were 2 children, but fortunately, the little boy hid, and they never found him. He hid under his bed.
So he never got tied up like the 10-year-old.
So he did not get tied up, but he was only 6 or 7 at the time. So he just hid under his bed because he was so afraid. So he did not. But
from a criminal standpoint, I would like to know if Raina and her husband were able to give a vivid description of the suspects, or were they masked, or did they have on colors?
Well, the answer is they were generally able to describe them, but when they came in, they kept a gun to the back of her husband's head, saying, "Don't look at me, don't look at me, where's the money, where's the money?" And so he's literally just going in like this, goes under his mattress, pulls out all the money that he has saved, that he had hidden under his mattress, because he doesn't even have a bank account, he just keeps his money under his mattress. And as soon as he gave them the money, they just started beating him in the head with the gun. So he's literally being beaten in the back of his head with the gun. So he knew the race. He had kind of an idea of their age. The apartment was dark when he came in because it was nighttime. And so he never really saw their faces that well. Raina saw them better than the others, but I believe the trauma of being raped was so traumatic for her that a lot of it she's blocked out. And I think that she also could describe them generally, but I don't know that she could, because they also kept telling her, "Don't look at me," and they had her forward.
That's awful. That is
It's an awful situation, and I think that what I want to make sure that callers kind of understand before they get that it's a civil case it's a premises liability case. It is a civil case, and it is with the Wills law firm because it happened at an apartment complex. Everyone that's a victim of rape is not going to be able to hire the Wills law firm and recover millions of dollars.
But it depends.
Because this is about a premises liability, saying someone else was responsible for keeping us safe. If you were in your own home and this happened in your own home that you either own and you didn't have
proper security.
Well, even if you're in your house and you have a security
I was about to say that that's not really
do.
true, because there have been a number of cases where the alarm system, which was supposed to be monitored, you pay for monitoring, we all pay for monitoring, the alarm system goes off and the monitor never calls.
Right.
No one ever calls. And so you become a victim of crime, either you're raped in your home or robbed, because the security company that was supposed to be providing you with security did not properly monitor your home. Absolutely, we can certainly bring a civil lawsuit and some damages
against security. But if you don't have security and you don't have monitoring and you're in your home and you become a victim, I want to make it very clear to the viewers that the unfortunate part is they can't hire the Wills law firm because they're not going to recover, because that's what civil law lawyers do. It's about the money. And let's be honest, if this was someone who didn't have insurance and they didn't have a way of recovering and there was no money on the other end, they wouldn't have a lawyer take their case.
Well, I also want to stress to the viewers that when bad things happen to you in public places, or sometimes even in your own home, when you are personally injured, if you are sexually assaulted, if you're robbed, if you're shot, there are oftentimes civil lawsuits that can be brought to recover for those injuries and damages that you receive. If this happened to you in a parking lot, if it happened to you in a parking garage, if it happened to you in an apartment complex, any public place, and even sometimes in your own home, especially if the security company doesn't do what it's supposed to do and provide you with adequate security. So there are a number of instances in which you can sue for civil damages when you receive a personal injury, whether you're at home or in a public place.
So that's an excellent education about a premise liability case, and my viewers never get that aspect, and so that was great information. What I want to ask you now is take us to the car wreck accident. You know, a lot of viewers hear all of these commercials on TV about call this guy, call that guy, if you're injured by 18-wheeler, you hear all of these people. And so take us through what that really means.
I have a case. My client is Latasha. Latasha was driving to a hospital to screen someone who had attempted suicide. That was her work at the time. She was a psychologist. who had a bachelor's degree and 2 master's degrees and was about to get her PhD. In fact, she was weeks away from defending her dissertation. She was in her car driving to the hospital to meet with this patient who had attempted suicide, to screen him for what further services he needed. And as she's driving along, this 18-wheeler comes barreling across 2 lanes of traffic. He pins her car to the median, flips her car over, continues, doesn't even stop. Finally, after her car is flipped onto the other side of 59, her car is mangled and pressed so badly that she's actually ejected out of the back of the car, thrown onto 59. She lay there in the middle of 59 bleeding from her brain, her body crumpled, and this guy in the truck sits in his truck, never gets out of his 18-wheeler, just sits there the whole time. Fortunately for my client, Latasha, a college girl who was on her way home that night, sees the accident, pulls over, and literally gets in the middle of 59 waving her hands, turns on the lights on her car and is waving her hands so that cars don't run over Latasha in the middle of 59. And she's calling 911 and she's crying, she's waving her hands. The police and ambulance get there, and the whole time, this guy driving this 18-wheeler is still sitting in his 18-wheeler. He never gets out. And we suspect, and what we allege in the lawsuit is the reason that he doesn't get out is not only did he not care and was he callous, but this was a man that records show was taking 4 to 5 Vicodin pills a day. Taking 4 to 5 Vicodin pills, which is a serious narcotic, every single day. And then this company was allowing this man to get behind an 18-wheeler and drive thousands of miles across our highways.
Wow.
And it turns out this company, which is a big retailer, they have thousands of trucks. As we sit here right now, they have thousands of trucks driving the highways of America, thousands of them. And this company, to this day, still does not screen any of their drivers for Vicodin and those type of prescription narcotics.
Well, two issues come up in this case from the criminal aspect, and this is where civil and criminal collide. First, we have a failure to stop and render aid. So was he charged with failure to stop and render aid?
Sounds like he stopped. He just didn't get.
But he didn't render aid. You can stop, but you still got to render aid. If the lady on the freeway called 911 and he didn't do his duty.
But I believe that what he was charged with was negligently changing lanes because he came over 2 lanes of traffic. I believe was charged with some sort of reckless driving charges. I do believe that he has given up his commercial driver's license.
But do you know whether or not he called 911 since he caused the injury?
I'm not certain.
You're not sure?
I'm not certain. I know several people call 911.
Okay.
A lot of people. It was 59. I mean, it was 59 is a busy highway.
Well, if he stopped and if he made a call, then he's clear on that part.
Well,
we're just trying to see where the criminal part collides.
But this is what I find amazing about it is, we had to get this guy's medical records to find out that he was taking an average of 4 to 5 Vicodin pills a day.
Was he injured also?
No, he wasn't injured at all. But what they did not do was draw his blood at the scene, and I still don't understand why his blood wasn't drawn at the scene.
Well, Juanita's going to talk. Yeah, I've asked Juanita to explain.
The most confusing part about driving while intoxicated, we use the term driving while intoxicated. We use that term here in Texas. Other states, they call it driving under the influence, which is probably more accurate.
It's probably more accurate.
Because our law says it can be anything. It can be any legal or illegal substance in which you have diminished use of your mental and physical faculties. And that can be prescription. And the unfortunate part is it's on the rise. The number of people that are driving on our highways under
prescription medications.
Yeah, in fact, we've learned from our experts that there are actually more people abusing prescription drugs than illicit
illegal drugs.
Absolutely. And so Vicodin...
But most companies, though, I'm sorry to cut you off, Juanita, but most companies have, and I'm sure you're investigating, an internal policy when their drivers have an accident, what protocol they're supposed to go to check to see if they've had a drink. They're supposed to do their own blood test.
Sure. Unfortunately, that did not happen here, and we had to do our own investigation. But this wasn't the first time that this guy had an accident. He'd had, I believe, and we have it in our lawsuit, he'd had a number of reprimands, more than a dozen reprimands.
With
and he'd had
by the company.
Yes, and
Oh,
he'd
wow.
previously rear-ended someone driving his 18-wheeler.
That's a problem.
So this was a guy that
They knew.
You
They-
biting to get in, Danny? Let me let Danny in.
No. One of the things when you mentioned that it was a large retailer, I don't know if you used the word retailer, the Tracy Morgan case came to mind.
Right.
yes,
And
this is a large retailer.
right, and
Well, it was Walmart where Tracy,
Tracy,
right?
Right.
right, and I saw she was because it's an open case. You don't want to point fingers, but it was the same type of situation. And living in Houston here since 2007, what's prevalent in Houston every day there's an 18-wheeler truck accident.
Mm-hmm.
And I recently saw one the other day, and it's not scary, but it just makes you be self-aware.
Well, the thing that's scary is like everyone is saying, everybody uses prescription drugs. A lot of people who drive 18-wheelers have back problems. And then we're on our cell phones too, which is dangerous. So that's dangerous enough. And then if you have prescription drugs that are causing you to lose the normal use of your mental and physical faculties, such to impair your reaction, because those drugs slow your reaction down to when you need to do something on the freeway, then,
Well, and worse yet, he was on cruise control.
wow.
He was driving an 18-wheeler on cruise control,
So they're not,
Houston
so it's not,
traffic?
driving on
oh my,
cruise control.
In Houston
And he denied that initially when we took his deposition. He denied that until he was confronted with the records from the actual vehicle that showed he was driving on cruise control when he hit my client. And that's why he never even applied his brakes. He never even applied his brakes.
So he
Her
didn't
car
see it
was flipped
coming.
over on the other side of 59 before he never, you can just see the skid marks where there are no skid marks. He just goes across. The only skid marks are after his vehicle actually runs into the median. So clearly, there was something going on here that he's driving on cruise control and doesn't even realize that he's caused such a catastrophic accident. But, my client, Latasha, was horribly injured in this accident. She's suffered a traumatic brain injury. She's had several back surgeries and spinal surgeries and neck surgeries. She suffers with chronic pain, as she will for the rest of her life. Her memory has been affected so badly that, sometimes she has problems even remembering her own birth date. She now reads at a third grade level. The woman who was about to get her PhD reads at a third grade level. And she will suffer with chronic pain for the rest of her life. She's lost her spleen, which means that she will always be subject to getting illnesses much easier than the rest of us. She's looking at, because she has so many fuses in her spine, those are surgeries that have to be repeated in the future. They don't last forever. We recently sent over to this retailer a $40 million demand for Latasha's case.
wow. Wow. Is she in a wheelchair? Can she walk?
She can walk, but what people don't understand is the reason that Latasha reads at a third grade level is because she can read 2 or 3 pages. She can read each word, but then she can't remember what she read on page 1 by the time she gets to page 3. And her ability to comprehend what she's reading has been so diminished because that part of her brain has been damaged. So she can read the words, but comprehending what she's reading and then remembering what she's read, she has such deficits in those areas that it's almost impossible. She couldn't even read a child's book.
Ugh, that's awful. That's awful. So I want to know, when the man was sitting in the car, did he do anything? You say he's sitting there, but does he
sat
get
there.
out? Is he asleep? Is he knocked out? He doesn't get out of his vehicle.
does
We
not
had
get out
some
of his vehicle.
stranger gets out and she's waving.
When the police arrived, they had to go over to the cab of his 18-wheeler and make him get out.
What is your theory on that?
We don't know. We suspect that maybe there was something going on. He was afraid that the police might discover it.
What would your theory be, Juanita?
Well, normally, most people he's involved in an accident, he knows the police are going to come. But when Rhonda previously talked about that there was no testing and things like that, the police determine if there's probable cause to test. So obviously, and it may have just been in the excitement and the things going on, they're having a conversation with him. He was able to answer questions. He was able to articulate. They gave them no reason to suspect alcohol. I'm sure they searched the car.
But they
and
would
most
know it was
people-
Vicodin or something. for
They
example.
would,
They would not know that.
initially. That's the problem. That's where we are.
With
is that
prescription
most
drugs, you
people-
might not be carrying them with you. You might take them in the morning and at night, but they're still in your system because they're long-lasting.
Right. And so obviously there was no signs there that made the police say, let's test this. Let's bring the DRE officers here and do the test and the
And tell my
HGN.
viewers what DRE is, Drug Recognition Experts. Okay.
So a DRE expert, they're officers that are trained in DRE, just like they're trained in alcohol and testing.
Let's take a break. Let's take a break. I think I have a caller. Caller, please turn your volume down and speak directly into your telephone. And thank you for calling.
Hello, interesting show. Will the manufacturer be sued? That was a tiny car. And I'll hang up. Thank you.
I'm not sure we heard you.
It was a tiny car.
Oh, was it a tiny car?
It was a tiny car. It was a smart car. It was very tiny.
Was she in a smart car?
Who's the caller?
I don't know. He's one of my regular callers. I've never met him before, caller. I don't even know who you are, do I? He's just someone that watches my show every week. I don't know who he is. He might know the accident. He
She
watched.
was in a smart car, yes.
Sounds like he was. Did it make the paper?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it was in the Houston Press.
It was in the Houston Press. That's
Okay.
correct.
Well, he's very knowledgeable.
Ah,
I don't know your name. You're gonna ever tell me? My mystery caller.
Well, I've told you before, but it's not the name I use.
I know. We
he
know.
is a mystery
we
caller.
know you. We know you're using an alias. That's why I keep messing with you. I didn't write it
Not
down because I knew
officially.
it.
It is one of my names, but not the one I go by.
what's
Okay.
one of your names?
What? Tell us the alias again.
My first name.
Cliff.
My
Okay.
first name.
Okay.
James.
James.
All right, James.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for calling,
Thank you.
James.
Good show.
Thank you, sir. So I do want to take this opportunity to tell my very good friend and co-host for the last, how long? A year?
Couple of years.
2 years. We work with the Path to Freedom at St. John's United Methodist Church. And I, a lot of times, have people who have records on the show talk about their personal experiences and what they've learned from it, how they overcame it, to encourage others and to help others. And so Danny is I want to just give you your props tonight. You look very handsome.
Thank you.
And I am so proud of you for being in the system for 26 long years. And August 5th, 2015, you were off parole. And I just want to let you know from the bottom of my heart that I love you and I'm
Appreciate
proud
it.
of you.
Thank you.
Okay?
Thank you.
And so tell us what you want to tell us about your experience and some of the ways. I know you've never thought about this before, the way criminal and civil intersect, but talk to me for a few seconds about yourself and where you've come and what you've learned and why people really shouldn't be afraid of felons and why you're deserving of, being a part of the system fully.
Well, I'll start off with taking a quote from Booker T. Washington. And he says, success is not measured by the things you obtain, but by the obstacles you face in life and how you deal with them. And that's what I've taken from what happened to me. It was an experience. Being in prison 15 years was an experience, but I also spent 6 years in the military and served honorably. What somebody had to bring to my attention that all of that fit in your life. And when you look at your life, you look at all your experiences. People in society may highlight or emphasize one area. They have that right to do that. But what empowers you is what you want to look at and what you want to highlight about your life. But for me, the wounds of my life created a wisdom in my life. So I didn't learn much from success, but I learned a lot from the times when I failed. And
But you were hard-headed, Danny. I mean, you had to go to prison 3 times.
Well, arrogance.
3 times?
Arrogance is a failure to see your own flaws. So maybe I was dealing with a lot of that.
You were arrogant?
Well, that's just what the description of what arrogance is. So I just look at that maybe that was some of my flaws in my character. But the thing about it is I was raised with the right values, but what attracted me to the opposite side is I knew what good looked like, but I didn't know what bad did.
Okay, so I just have to know, Danny, what were you in prison for those 3 times?
Well, 3 times.
Don't hesitate, Danny. Say what it is.
Well, I'm not afraid of it because that's part of my history. I went twice for robbery by threats.
Give an example.
Robbery by threats is
Say what you did.
walking up to someone and saying, "Give me your money," but not having a weapon.
Okay, so you didn't have a weapon and you didn't hurt anyone?
But he
I
threatened
never
to.
Well, I never did. And I explained to the detectives this, and they told me, "Danny, we're going to help you. You're not a criminal. You have a drug problem.
He was a drug addict.
Oh, you were a
Substance abuse. Okay. Substance abuse."
It was cocaine, right?
Right,
Crack.
right. And it all started 14, 15. You experiment with something. I come through the era where we didn't really have a lot of people that used crack cocaine before us. So we were kind of like, we started experimenting with this drug that we didn't know what the side effects were going to be. And most of the side effects for most of us was prison. And a lot of us died in our addictions. Fortunately, I didn't. But the point is, yeah, that past is there, and I'm not proud of it. And every day, and most, if not all the things I do in my life, is to show remorse for what I did.
So what did you go to prison for the third time?
Possession.
So it was drugs also?
Right.
So you really feel that drugs, crack cocaine, really led to you being in prison?
No, what led me to prison is me not holding myself to a higher standards of morals.
And being accountable.
Right. It's just, it's just a decision.
But I think it's different though. If you are an addict, if you have a true addiction, I mean, that is really an illness that you need to get treatment for. I think there is a big distinction between having an addiction and being a violent criminal, someone who's a murderer or a rapist or something like that. It sounds to me like what you had was really a drug addiction. I know you were in the military. So many men that have served honorably in our military, one of the byproducts of that is that oftentimes they wind up having a drug addiction. Sometimes it's because they're trying to self-medicate because things that they experienced in the military. Other times it's depression or other things that went on while they served our country. And thank you, by the way, for your service to our country.
All right.
But I will say this, I think that particularly given your background, it seems to me that because what you really needed was drug treatment, that's what really led you to be in our penal system. And I completely agree with President Obama that drug offenders, in my mind, are very different from rapists, like the 4 guys that broke into my client's apartment and gang raped her. I see a big distinction.
Because if they were drug addicts, when they got the money, they should have ran.
They would have ran.
No.
They would have ran. But the bottom line is, Rhonda, and I don't know the numbers, maybe Vivian knows, but it's well over 60% of the people that are in prison are drug addicts.
But Danny
and
will tell you this,
criminality is related to their addiction.
And see, I really think that our prisons should really be saved for the pedophiles, the rapists, the murderers, the violent criminals. I think that people that have drug addiction and drug problems, they need drug treatment, as long as they're non-violent offenders.
But let me tell you what the societal train wreck has been. You have to be ready for the treatment. Am I right, Dan? And you can't force treatment, and that's one of the problems. And so we've had, when Ann Richards was governor, you had an alternative. You could go to treatment. But then when Daddy Bush came in, he got rid of the treatments. He said, we can't force treatment on people. We'll just punish. And then somewhere there has to be a happy medium. So Danny, share with the viewers and my ladies, my sisters, what your epiphany was. What made you that last time say, when I get out of here, I'm not going back?
Well, it wasn't done alone with just me. What I did different is I surrounded myself with different people.
In prison.
Right. It had to begin there. And I don't want to put a spiritual twist on it, but I had this real simple prayer. And it was this. I don't want to get out, I want to stay out. See, after that 3rd time I saw a pattern. And I said, what good would it do for me to get out to come back? That would be worse than being here. This is my 3rd time here. It's not Disneyland, but I understand how I got here is to escape responsibility, because subconsciously, when you're in prison, you really don't have a lot of responsibilities. But the science says that I'm not an addict because I use drugs and alcohol. What made me an addict, Rhonda, is not that substance, but how I think. So even removed from drugs and alcohol, I could still end up in prison because my thought process said it's okay to do this. when you want something, you can have it by any means necessary.
You can take it.
You can take it, you can lie, you can steal, you can cheat. So it's not, drugs and alcohol are just a symptom.
So can I ask you, did you go to rehab? Is that how you were able to kick drugs?
I've been to rehab and I'm still rehabbing. You never stop
being an addict.
You know, it's a process that's daily. And when you hear that terminology, one day at a time, that's a real lifestyle for someone who has been clean and sober since 2004. I'm just as close to where I last used today as I was from the last day I used, because it's a thought and a decision that made me do it then, and I can walk out of this place, have that thought, make the decision, and then it'll start all over again.
So you have to make that decision every day, and you've made it every day since 2004.
But I have people like you in my life.
And I'm here for you, Danny.
And that changes my thought process. You surround yourself with positive people, and let me tell you, it's a such thing as adult peer pressure. I learned to do wrong through peer pressure as you're young.
I was wondering, how did you get hooked on drugs? Was it just something you tried
Peer
once
pressure.
and then...
He was out of the military, about 28, right?
Well,
20
it still is. The military came out with a policy you couldn't smoke marijuana. I come from an era where marijuana, and even in the military, they really wasn't drug testing it. But when Reagan came in and the war on drugs, they started testing us in the military. I worked at JAG when I worked in the military. I was a paralegal. I didn't want to lose my job.
Tell people what JAG is.
Judge Advocate General Corps.
The lawyers.
The lawyers.
It's the
Military.
legal
lawyers.
department of the
Right.
My
military.
people don't.
So I was equipped with what a paralegal does in the civilian world. That, to me, was something I didn't want to lose. I didn't want to work with my hands. I always wanted to work with my brains. I always wanted to dress in a suit and carry a briefcase. I didn't know where I wanted to be, but I didn't want to be anybody's construction. I didn't want to be anything laboring in life. But to go back to my point is this, that in this process of staying clean and sober, we're categorized over here, and we change. And what I do every day is I work with people coming in and out of prison. Every Thursday, I coordinate a prison ministry.
Is that the church or veterans?
At the church.
But you also work for the
Well,
veterans.
I work with homeless veterans Monday through
So
Friday.
do you feel that your faith is what's, because I know a lot of people who suffer from addiction, they're constantly in some type of counseling, or they go to some type of group therapy. Are those things that you do? Because you've been clean and sober for 11 years, which, congratulations, that's amazing.
Danny is one of my heroes.
But what are you doing? What are you doing? Because I think people watching this would want to know, what are you doing to be successful? So maybe they could emulate you, because a lot of people out there want to be successful like you are.
But one thing I want to do is live what I believe. And you hadn't heard me mention God not one time, but that is the center of everything I do. But the thing about it is, a lot of people talk about God. They talk a lot about scriptures. I'm that opposite person. I want to personify that in action in life. Where somebody asks, what are you doing? Then they open the door, then I'll talk about God. Then I'll talk about Jesus. But other than that, I just want to live it and be the example, and not just a person that walks around and talk, God did this, God did this.
Right.
He deserves the honor and praise, but what he really wants to see is me walking in
Walking
that
the
belief.
walk and talking the talk.
Do less talking and more walking.
Let me ask you this, just to get on our topic again, because you know I love your testimony and your slant on life. But as a felon, when you came out with that X on your back, how did that affect you getting an apartment? Like here, there's something going on in this apartment complex, but a lot of times felons can't get apartments. So how do you feel about that, and how did you deal with that?
Well, I actually did an article in the Houston Chronicle, and it was about housing. Even with success, you can't get in housing. Housing is listed like this in apartments: A, B, C, and D. Mm-hmm. If you have a felony, you're only going to be eligible for C and D properties. Mm-hmm. But these C and D properties hold people still living in the behavior that you're trying to get away from.
And like the apartment complex, I'm sure that they were in was probably a C or D.
So say I make $30,000 a year, I can afford to live in an A and B property. When I go apply, I can't get in. They're pushing me back into the environment
that you're trying to get away
that
from.
I'm trying to get away from.
But can you understand that people still can be afraid of you?
I
And that
understand
apartment
it.
complex might feel like you're a greater risk.
It challenged me to say that I need to do more to show that this change is evident in my life.
'Cause
I've
one
been
of
on my
the things-
job 6 years.
You have been
I've
6
been, and so what I did when I got out running is this: instead of telling people I've changed, what's going to be something that can't be refuted is some consistency in my life. After a while, people won't ask you what you did. They'll ask you, what can you do? And so you to tell the guys that's getting out, you carry this message to them and say, look, don't get out with expectations that the world owes you something. Show them that you changed by showing some focus, some discipline, and most important, some consistency in your life.
And that's why you've held the same job for 6 years.
And I won't
So
look for anything different.
I'm curious, how were you able to find a job? Because I know a lot of convicted felons have a problem finding a job as well.
Well, it's like an actor auditioning for a part. When I go in, I sell myself. And when I go into an interview, I ask them, why do I want to work for you?
Right.
I look at your company, I research them, I tell them where they're located on the stock market, what their value, what their pluses and what their minuses is. Tell me why would I want to work for you? And when you're an interview, if you're not prepared for that, see the next 10 guys that come behind me, they're not gonna come with that perspective.
But but let me tell you what one of Danny's big thing is: ban the box. That's the box that says you're a felon or what is your record on there. But Danny, how do we deal with that if you have a great interview and generally they know you're a felon? Do you tell them in that interview?
I use it as an advantage
What do you say?
because that's not who I am today.
How do you use it though?
Well, I use it like this. I said, look, it was an experience just like my honorable discharge with the military. The first job I got out of the military was at the Texas Department of Public Safety in Farmers Branch. And when I got that position, it was just a clerk position, but they never had hired a male, especially a black male, in that position. So I used some of my positives in an interview to minimize that negative. And I come in with a lot of confidence, you know, and when people are looking for someone that's going to come to work and show up. And the Ban the Box initiative, 2 weeks ago, I'm a part of an organization called Texas Advocates for Justice. It's a grassroots organization aimed at restorative justice. They flew me to Washington, D.C. 3 Thursdays ago to participate in a march against Ban the Box. And I was standing in front of the White House, and I was asking myself, how did I spend 15 years in prison, 26 years on parole, and I'm standing in the White House, in front of the White House? Why? Because that's real change.
So can I ask what you do now? What's your job?
I work for an agency called U.S. Vets. We work with liaison with the VA to transport homeless veterans to various locations around Houston. We work with Salvation Army, Bread of Life, Goodwill.
And Bread of Life is one of the programs we have at our church. So talk about what you do in the church also.
I also work at Tenement House. It's the housing facility that St. John's in connection with Beyonce and her father built for
Beyonce knows.
Beyonce knows
And her father.
to take critically homeless people off the street. So I work as a resident assistant about 24 hours a week, part-time, and it's just monitoring and supporting the people there.
And the volunteer work at church.
I also coordinate a project called the Lazarus Project with the Path of Freedom. It's a reentry program that the church runs, targeted at meet and greet men and women out of prison.
It's like when they get right off the bus at the Greyhound.
Right.
You know, our church is on Crawford, St. John's United Methodist. So when they get off the bus from prison, Danny's group goes through and they get them, they take them in, they give them cell phones to give them clothes, cell phone, keep going.
Mostly love and support.
So let me ask you this. Do you all do anything, for example, if they're pedophiles?
This has been challenging for me, and this thing is dealing with sex offenders. and we talk about it in conference. That is something in society has not really grasped it. Nobody knows what to do. Everybody's saying the same thing. We can't take these people like they did in New York and put them on an island up under a bridge in tents. As heinous as that crime it is, something has to be looked at. These still are human beings. I don't condone their behavior, but I cannot categorize them to the point to where we throw them all in the ocean.
Well, you realize,
I think we should
Danny,
just lock
that
them up and
for
throw
the
away
most-
the key, but
That's her.
But
that's my position.
honestly, that's what we do anyway, and that's
Really what we do.
What most people don't even realize that people like Rhonda, or they have a misnomer, they think. But our law is very strict, and that's another issue, that repeat offenders that sexually abuse children are locked up for
right.
the rest of their lives.
And if they're
whether
not,
they're not in prison,
if they're not, they're registering as sex offenders. And trust me, there are a lot of cases of people not registering, because you might register at parole to your parents' house, but your parents don't want a sex offender living in their house because it's going to be.
or they're just such strict
Their
requirements.
HOA
that they
might
can't-
their
Yeah.
HOA might kick them
Or,
out.
or they
They
might
have
live too
such
close to
strict
a house
requirements.
that
They
they
can't-
usually
right.
live under a bridge, and then they just come to that house to collect their mail, and so then they keep going back for failing to register. So I mean, sex offenders are a problem in society because we have to try to treat them and get them re-entered.
Well, the hardest thing is when I've known a man or a woman for a long time, and I don't know their criminal history, and they spring that on me. And I'm riding, and they say, you know, Dan, the reason I stay up under the bridge is, it's not that I can't afford an apartment. I'm
I
a
can't
sex
get one.
offender.
Right.
I can't get.
And I'm like, I don't really have a response for you right now on that. Let me get back with you.
And we got 5 minutes, so you wrap yours up, and then we're gonna go around the table, and we'll end with Miss Wills, since she's our guest educator tonight.
Well, for me, it's short and simple. Always an honor for you giving us a platform, a person like me and the other people we bring on that have these. We don't like to consider ourselves today as coming out prisoners. We see we're returning citizens. Until we do something to take away our citizenship, once we go to prison, we feel like we paid our time. When we come back, we want to be given a chance to fit back in society, pay our taxes, and be an asset.
And Danny registered to vote August 6th, the day after he got off parole, because that's Texas law. So your turn, Juanita.
What I would say is the bottom line is there are, with DWI cases, with rape cases, they're heinous in itself. To make a big difference is that ultimately, yes, criminal and civil law does sometimes collide, but I don't want people out there thinking if they've been wronged by a criminal that they're going to be able to call some lawyers and the lawyers are going to take their case. The bottom line is if there's not money on the end of it, the lawyer's not going to take their case. If it's not, and it depends on the money. Let's be honest, Texas has some of the strictest, and Ms. Wills can say part of why she files in federal court is they don't have the restrictions that Texas law does have on amount that people can recover. So I think sometimes, because we all get them, that we have someone say, oh, someone did this, or this cop did this, or this happened to me, and I have to explain to them, I can probably refer you to a lawyer, but if this civil lawyer who takes this on the contingency fee doesn't see something big on the end of it, they really don't have a case. So we just need to make that very clear.
Okay.
So I have a completely different viewpoint than Juanita. Both of the cases I've been talking about today were filed in Harris County State Court. These are both state court cases. If someone out there has been injured, or they've been hurt, or they have been wronged by on a premises, whether it be a public premises, or if they have been injured by a negligent driver, in particular an 18-wheeler, I've had many, many cases where people have been injured by products, for example, or they suffered other injuries. It's always worth your while to call a lawyer and to see if a lawyer is going to represent you on that case.
Because one of the other things it does when you call a lawyer and hire them is it makes the company change their policies so that it's safe for the next person. So there's a twofold reason in that, but people do have to understand when it's contingency and you can't afford it, because anyone in our society can sue anybody if you want to pay, but if you want someone to do a contingency, they have to see that they can get their money back.
I mean, for
And-
example, I recovered $5.2 million for a man who had his throat cut at work by a coworker because the employer allowed this person, who he may be out of prison by now, but he went to prison, he was allowed to carry a knife at work. This company didn't have a policy against bringing knives to work. So
Is that like a regular pocket knife?
no, it was a long knife he kept on a
But he didn't
clip.
need it for work.
No, he didn't need it for work. He was a truck driver, and he got mad because he felt like this coworker, my client, was driving his truck, his 18-wheeler, instead of driving a different 18-wheeler, and this guy snapped. He pulled his knife on other people before at work, but this time he snapped. He slashed my client's throat from here to here. My client will never be able to swallow solid foods again because of the severity of his injuries, and we recovered $5.2 million for him.
Wow, congratulations.
And that's
on
public,
doing
so
that.
I can talk about it.
That's public because a lot of your settlements are not
A
public.
lot
and
of
you
them are
cannot-
confidential, but
you
that
know,
was public.
I do appreciate you telling us how the civil law intersects. And let's add one more lesson in our 1 minute that we have. The amounts in controversy in district court in Harris County have to be above what these days?
Well, I mean, really.
Is it still over 100,000?
No, it just depends. You can also seek injunctive relief, so it doesn't necessarily.
Okay.
I don't want people to think that it
We have
has to
1
be a
minute, so
monetary. Yeah.
Go ahead and just wrap it up. And would you come back and see us again?
I would love to come back to spend time with the great Vivian King.
And maybe
on
next
your
time,
show.
thank you so much. Maybe next time we can talk about more about how employment law can intersect with the criminal justice system.
would love to do
Juanita, thank you as always for sharing your knowledge with us. You've been with me since the beginning, since 2011. Thank you, Danny. You've been here with me since 2013. So thank you for continuing to work hard in the community and being a taxpayer instead of a lawbreaker. And we appreciate you. I love you. I support you. And we'll do it again next week. So remember, viewers that are out there, I want to tell your story. So contact me if you have a great story, a great testimonial that we can learn from and educate people about the criminal justice system that we all pay for. Thank you for watching Truth and Justice with Vivian King. I'll see you next Wednesday. Thank you for tuning in again. Tonight we have something really good, a hot topic in the news this week. He's been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to educate real stories. Really good, a hot topic in the news this week. He's been charged with crime. This is a show where I try to